And Zombie Reddit today's story is...
My stepdaughter demanded respect but rejected my authority as a father. 2 years later, her mother revealed the shocking reason for our marriage, and they lost everything. I am 42 years old and have been married for 10 years to my wife, Maggie, who is 39. She has a daughter called Remy, 17, from her previous marriage to Esteban, a 40-year-old man. When I married Maggie, I fully understood that Remy came as part of the package, and I was totally willing to take on that role. Personally, I decided not to have biological children, so I thought this situation would be a good balance, having a family life without the pressure of raising children of my own. Maggie and Esteban separated when Remy was just 3 years old. From what I understand, it wasn't a particularly nasty divorce, but they don't have a very strong co-parenting relationship either. Esteban is involved in his daughter's life, although not as much as he should be. He pays child support, but he doesn't really spend much time with Remy. I entered Remy's life when she was 6 years old. I met Maggie 3 years after her divorce, during the wedding of one of her friends. We started talking and connected immediately. At the end of the event, I asked her out and she accepted. We've been together ever since. At first, everything seemed to flow naturally, and we built a life together. I thought this would last forever, but as time went by, I began to notice changes in our relationship that made me rethink things. I tried hard to be a positive influence on Remy. I did everything from helping her with her schoolwork to funding her hobbies and making sure she had opportunities that I didn't have during my childhood. What any parent would do. I even set up a college fund for her when I married Maggie, because at the time I considered her my daughter, even if not biologically. Fast forward to the present, and things have become quite complicated. Remy has developed a rather negative attitude in recent years, especially towards me. Initially, I thought it was normal teenage behavior, but I gave up that idea when I saw the situation worsening. She behaves as if I didn't exist, treats me as if I were simply a source of money, and makes sarcastic comments about how I'm not her real father. I have tried to talk to her to improve our relationship, but these conversations always end badly. Last week, everything came to a head. Remy was in a bad mood, stomping around the house and making a fuss over something insignificant, like running out of her favorite shampoo. I usually try not to make a big deal out of these situations. I understand that teenagers have difficult days, but this time it affected me more than usual, because I had spent the whole weekend helping her complete a school project. I took her to the library several times, bought last-minute materials that I had forgotten, and stayed up late on Sunday, helping her to perfect everything. I thought that my efforts would at least have earned some gratitude, or at least a neutral attitude. Instead, she was dismissive and rude. She ignored me when I greeted her, left her belongings everywhere, despite having been asked to pick them up, and muttered complaints about how annoying the rules in someone else's house were. When she made that hurtful comment, I could no longer ignore it. I decided to intervene. Calmly, I pointed out that her behavior was disrespectful, and that the way she was treating me was not appropriate. I mentioned everything I had done for her recently, hoping to remind her that I was on her side and did not deserve such treatment. Her response left me stunned. She made it unequivocally clear that she did not see me as someone with the authority to comment on her actions. It wasn't just what she said, but how she said it, with sharp, painful words. I felt it was deliberate, as if she wanted to remind me of my place in her life, or rather, my lack of a place. I was really shocked. After all the time, effort, and resources I had invested in helping her succeed, this was how she perceived me. Not as a father, not even as part of the family, but as someone with no right to have a say in her behavior. What came next was even more painful. Maggie was nearby and clearly heard the whole conversation. I expected her to intervene, support me, or at least try to mediate. Instead, she sided with Remy. She basically confirmed that I was in no position to discipline her daughter and implied that I was overstepping my bounds by trying to do so. That was even worse than anything Remy could say. It wasn't just a momentary disagreement, it was a rejection of the role I thought I had in this family. I have invested so much time, energy, and money in this family, and now I am being told that I have no say in my own household. Well, if I am just the one who pays the bills, I guess I will start behaving like one. This is where the situation became controversial. As I mentioned before, I had set up a college fund for Remy when Maggie and I got married. This fund was completely mine, separate from Maggie's finances, and it was also not something that Esteban had contributed to. Originally, I planned to cover a significant portion of Remy's college costs to give him a good start in life, but after that conversation, I began to reevaluate the situation. If I'm not part of the family enough to have an opinion about Remy's attitude, why should I be part of the family enough to finance his university education? So I decided to dissolve the university fund and transfer the money to my retirement account. I didn't immediately announce this decision to Remy and Maggie. I didn't want to appear mean, but Maggie found out when she went to check the account balance for an education-related expense. She confronted me, furious, accusing me of using the money against them. She claimed that I was ruining Remy's future out of spite and acting childish. I explained that I wasn't sabotaging anything. I was simply redirecting my money towards my own future, as they clearly didn't consider me part of theirs. My wife argued that I was being unfair, especially as Remy is still a teenager and doesn't fully understand the consequences of her actions. I replied that if she is mature enough to disrespect me and remind me that I am not her father, then she is mature enough to accept the reality that I am not obliged to support her as a father would. Before anyone jumps to conclusions, I am not an insensitive person. I didn't leave Remy with no options. I told Maggie that if Remy really wants to go to college, he can look for a job, apply for scholarships, or ask Esteban to take on that responsibility for once. He has alternatives, he just won't have a free ride provided by me anymore. This whole situation has created a huge divide between Maggie and me. She thinks I'm acting out of revenge, while I feel I'm just setting necessary boundaries. Some of Maggie's relatives are intervening, saying I'm going too far, but from my perspective, I've been more than generous, and all I've received in return has been resentment and disrespect. I did not marry Maggie to be treated like a walking wallet, and if my contributions are not appreciated, then I will gladly step aside and focus on myself. So, am I the bad guy for turning my stepdaughter's college fund into my retirement fund after my wife and her daughter made it clear that I'm not really part of the family? Update 1. I have noticed some comments pointing out the way I expressed myself when I mentioned that I had invested money in Remy. I understand why it could be misinterpreted, as if I were reducing her to a transaction or acting as if she owed me something. That was not my intention at all. I did not invest all that time, effort, and money in her expecting compensation. I did not want her to feel indebted to me or to think that she had any obligation. I did it because I sincerely believed that she was part of this family, and helping her to succeed was simply what a family member does. What hurts me the most is not the money, it's realizing that they never really considered me part of the family. Maggie's words about me not being Remy's father weren't just about discipline, they represented a rejection of my place in their lives. For years, I thought I was building something meaningful with both of them. I believed I was more than just the person who paid the bills, that I was a father figure and a husband whose contributions were valued. But when they treat me like an ATM, how am I supposed to feel? If I'm only here to provide financially, why can't I call it an investment? That's clearly what they've been thinking. A few days after the argument with Maggie and Remy, I received a message from Esteban, Remy's biological father. We don't usually communicate much, so it was quite unexpected to hear from him. His message was brief. He wanted to meet to talk about Remy. When we met, he started acting overly friendly, as if we were old friends. He made a few jokes, tried to laugh at random things, and seemed to be faking it. It was uncomfortable and artificial, and I wasn't fooled. After a few minutes of this false cordiality, I asked him to get to the point. It was then that he abandoned the charade and told me clearly that I should reconsider paying for Remy's university education. According to him, my decision to withdraw the university fund was selfish and motivated by pride. He claimed that I was punishing Remy for behaving like a teenager and allowing my pride to interfere with what was best for her. For years, I have been the one to take financial responsibility for Remy. Esteban has done the bare minimum as a father, but there he was, accusing me of failing his daughter while taking the parental credit without really doing anything. I reminded him that he was Remy's father, not me. If anyone had a responsibility to pay for her college education, it was him. He immediately became defensive, claiming that he couldn't afford it. I didn't buy that excuse. Esteban has a good job and could easily cover the educational costs if he really wanted to. The truth is that he simply doesn't want to spend the money. For years, he has been happy to let me handle most of the financial responsibilities, and now that I have stepped aside, he is desperate to put that burden back on my shoulders. I made it clear to him that it was too late. I wasn't going to change my mind or go back on my decision. The college fund had been withdrawn and was no longer my responsibility. It was then that Esteban decided to escalate the situation. He didn't get the reaction he was hoping for. I kept my cool, didn't play his game, and walked away when it became clear that the conversation was going nowhere. Since then, he has sent me several messages, ranging from attempts to make me feel guilty, to subtle threats and appeals to my sense of responsibility. One minute, he accuses me of ruining Remy's future, and the next, he tries to appeal to the fact that I have cared for her for years. Stephen has had every opportunity to take care of his daughter, and he still has them. If he really cares about Remy's education, he will find a way to finance it himself. This whole situation has forced me to reflect deeply on my relationship with Maggie, Remy, and even Stephen. I don't think my decision to dissolve the college fund was an easy one, but I believe it was the right one. At this point, I feel like I have been tested from every possible angle. I have tried to do the right thing for years, even when my efforts were not recognized or valued. But now I have reached my limit. I will not allow people to take advantage of me, no matter how many times they try to make me feel guilty. It's sad because I really care about Remy and want her to succeed, but I've realized that my involvement in her life has always been on their terms. They wanted my money and support, but they weren't willing to give me the respect or the role that should have come with that position. And now that I've set limits, everyone is upset, not because I'm wrong, but because it makes them uncomfortable. If they want to see me as an ATM, they'll have to accept that I decide when the transactions end. Update 2. Recently, the situation has escalated with my wife Maggie and her daughter Remy. Yes, I now call her your daughter. After all the back and forth about Remy's college fund, she made the decision not to attend college at all. Maggie was quick to blame me for this. She insists that my decision to dissolve the college fund demoralized Remy. Although I regret that Remy feels this way, I fail to understand how all this responsibility falls on me when I am not her biological father. She should be having this conversation with Esteban, who is really responsible. Stephen has been noticeably absent in all the practical aspects of parenting, especially when it comes to finances. He has a good job and can pay more than enough to cover his daughter's university fees. However, he has always limited himself to child support and nothing more. I don't understand why the moment my contribution stopped, everyone started acting as if Remy's future was exclusively my responsibility. I could no longer ignore the unfairness of the situation, so I mentioned it to Maggie. I asked her why Esteban wasn't funding Remy's university education. Far from acknowledging that I had a valid point, Maggie deflected the conversation. She went on to claim that I was the one who had let Remy down and that my decision to redirect the university fund was selfish and malicious. Even Maggie is partly to blame because she is not Remy's only parent. He also relies on his mother to finance his studies. Trying to make her see this led nowhere. The conversation became frustrating, with her beating around the bush and avoiding answering the question directly. Then she said something that several of you had commented on in my posts, and that even I had suspected before writing them. Maggie mentioned that she believed it was my obligation to pay for Remy's university education because she had married me for the financial security I provided. At first, I wasn't sure I had heard her correctly. It seemed like the kind of thing someone would exaggerate in an argument, not something they would actually admit, but there it was, stated with complete clarity. I stopped and asked her what exactly she meant by that. She hesitated, tried to backtrack, and couldn't offer me a coherent explanation. That moment changed everything for me. Hearing her reduce our relationship to a financial arrangement, hearing her openly say that she saw me as a means to an end, was worse than a betrayal. Deep down, I always had the feeling that my financial situation played an important role in Maggie's interest in me. I tried to convince myself that it was only part of our relationship, but now, hearing her express it directly, I felt that all my worst fears had been confirmed. At least she was honest, although I don't think it was intentional, and she probably only said it to hurt me during our argument. Either way, it helps to clarify things. After taking a moment to gather my thoughts, I told Maggie that I couldn't continue with this situation. If she really saw me only as a source of financial security, I refused to continue to play that role. I told her that I would no longer be her financial support and that they needed to move out as soon as possible. I didn't want things to escalate unnecessarily, but I couldn't allow this situation to continue either. All this has led me to question absolutely everything. Did Maggie ever really see me as a life partner, or was I just a convenient financial solution? Did Remy ever consider me a father figure, or was I just the person who made things easier for her? At this point, I feel that I have done everything I can to be a good husband and stepfather. I have supported them financially and emotionally, and in every other way I could imagine. But now, I get the impression that none of that mattered as much as my ability to pay the bills. Update 3. A few weeks ago, Maggie and Remy moved out. I thought that would be the end of it, but last week, Maggie got in touch. She asked to meet up, and I honestly didn't think it was a good idea. However, in a moment of weakness, I decided to hear what she had to say. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I thought it might provide some kind of closure. We met in a restaurant for lunch. When she saw me, she started crying almost immediately. She apologized for everything. She admitted that she was wrong to treat me the way she did, to see me only as a source of income. She said she loved me and couldn't imagine going on without me. I listened to her as she cried and begged me to reconsider, telling me how sorry she was for what she had done. But no matter how sincere she seemed, nothing changed for me. All I could think about was the moment she confessed that she had married me for financial security. I had been hoping, somewhere deep down, that when we met, he would tell me that it had been said in a moment of anger, out of frustration, and that it did not reflect his true feelings. But that was not what happened. Instead of denying it, he confirmed it. He told me that what he had said was true, that he really meant it. And that was when I had absolute clarity. I gave her the opportunity to speak, to apologize, to try to make things right. But when she finished, I told her I wanted a divorce. Maggie really tried to change my mind, but I explained that this was a final decision. I remained calm, even when she became upset and started to verbally attack me. I don't know why, but I always try to keep my cool. I think losing your temper only makes situations worse. Making this decision was not easy. I still have feelings for Maggie, but the person I thought I knew is not who she really is. I no longer trust her because I don't believe she ever truly loved me. Maybe she did and then that feeling faded, or maybe she never felt that way about me. Either way, that's all I need to know to decide to divorce her. It's simply not worth staying married under these circumstances. Since that meeting, things have been quiet. I haven't had much communication with Maggie. She hasn't even written or called me after our encounter. I think she understood that my decision was unshakable. Update 4. I have started the divorce proceedings. Honestly, I didn't realize how difficult this process would be. I thought that once a decision was made, things would be simpler, but the reality is much more complicated than I imagined. There is much more to it than just signing documents and moving on. Maggie calls me occasionally. Each conversation is similar. She tries to convince me to reconsider, asking me to come back to sort things out. She tells me she's sorry, that she loves me and can't imagine her life without me. On one occasion, I told him that I was going to transfer my phone number to my bank account because he seemed to have got confused and wanted to talk to the bank rather than me from the way he was expressing himself. When I made that comment, he got angry and hung up abruptly, but a few days later, he called again. After several similar calls, I decided to block his number. Remy hasn't even contacted me, and as far as I know, he's still determined not to attend university. Update 5. The divorce has finally been finalized. I feel liberated, and so does my bank account, as it was the one that had to deal with Maggie and Remy the most. Even Esteban felt entitled to my money. Fortunately, the process wasn't as drawn out as I feared. We didn't have to go to trial, something my lawyer had warned could be quite complicated. It was all relatively straightforward because, on his advice, we had signed a very solid prenuptial agreement. That's what you get when you have a good legal professional. This made the division of assets much easier, ensuring that everything was handled efficiently and fairly. I can't imagine how much more difficult it would have been without that document. I was spared the stress and uncertainty of a protracted legal battle. Instead, everything moved quite quickly once the process got underway. I take that as small consolation in the midst of this whole situation. Maggie, on the other hand, was not so willing to let things go. Even at the last moment, she kept trying to persuade me to change my mind. I often wonder what would have happened if we didn't have that prenuptial agreement. Would she have insisted on our love, or would she have allowed the divorce to take its course? She could have claimed part of my retirement funds, so I really don't know. The only thing I know for sure is what happened in this reality where I had a legal agreement, and that is that she kept telling me that she was sorry, that she loved me, and that we could work things out if I gave her another chance. Fortunately, I did not question my decision, and I was very clear about why I had made it. A few days before the divorce was finalized, Remy contacted me. He apologized for everything that had happened and hoped that this would change my decision. It was too late, as all the documents had already been filed. I replied, thanking him for his apology and explained that my decision was final. I wished him the best for the future, and I really mean it. I think Remy will need all the luck he can get if he wants to achieve anything in life, because his entitled attitude and insincere apology won't get him very far. I have found a woman with whom to share my life, and I have learned my lesson. She has no children. She never wanted to have children, and I am at a stage in my life where I don't want to deal with that responsibility. The previous experience was more than enough for me. Nor is she with me because of my financial situation, as she covers her own expenses, including her apartment. Although we have a formal relationship, we each live in our own space. I'm not saying it will always be like this, but neither of us has yet mentioned the idea of living together. She also often invites me to dinner, paying the bill herself. Of course, I also invite her on other occasions. It's not like I'm taking advantage. At least she has shown me that relationships can exist based on love, and not on money, something important considering the trauma she carried with her on this issue. Maggie has moved house several times as I understand it, and has had financial problems due to numerous credit card debts. When she lived with me, I could manage them because I covered many of the day-to-day expenses, but after the divorce, the debts accumulated until they became unsustainable. I don't know how she is handling the situation now, as I have lost touch with her over time. However, as far as I knew, she had borrowed money from friends, who refused to give it to her. These friends told me that they didn't want to end up like me, financing all aspects of Maggie's life. Remy never managed to go to university. I get the impression that he didn't really want to either, and that using the withdrawal of the university fund as an excuse was simply his way of saying, I'm not going to study because nobody helps me. If he had really been interested in studying, he would have applied for educational loans or asked his father for help. Maybe he did, but that's the feeling I'm left with. For a time, after finishing high school, she moved out on her own. She currently works in a shopping center doing cleaning work, where I occasionally see her when I do my shopping. She doesn't greet me, and I don't greet her either.